Jake Morrison stood in the long line with the other soldiers. The distribution center on Luna Station was busy today. Men in military uniforms walked around talking and laughing. Today was the day they would get their rewards for winning the war against the Zephyrians. The war had ended 3 months ago. Earth's forces had beaten the alien empire after 5 years of fighting. Now the winners got to pick their prizes. Jake watched as soldiers ahead of him chose weapons, strange alien technology, and land on distant planets. "Next," called the officer at the desk. Jake stepped forward. The man looked at his tablet and smiled. "Captain Morrison, you did good work out there. Shot down 12 enemy fighters and led the attack on their command ship. You get first pick from the special category." Jake looked confused. "Special category?" The officer pointed to a side room. "The prisoners. High-value ones. Former nobles, scientists, military officers. You get to pick one as your personal property." Jake's stomach felt heavy. He had heard rumors about this, but hoped they were not true. "Property? War trophies. Slaves, basically. Don't worry, they're broken in already. Won't give you trouble." The officer stood up. "Come on, let's see what we have for you." Jake followed him into the side room. 20 Zephyrians sat on benches along the walls. They wore simple gray clothes and had metal bands around their wrists. Their blue-tinted skin looked pale under the bright lights. Silver markings on their faces and arms showed their rank in their old society. Most of them stared at the floor. A few looked up with empty eyes. Jake felt sick seeing them like this. During the war, Zephyrian soldiers had fought hard. They were smart and brave enemies. Now they sat here like broken toys. "This one here," the officer said, stopping in front of a woman. "Former Lady Kira of House Veltar. She was some kind of diplomat before the war. Smart one. Speaks perfect English, too." Jake looked at her. She was tall for a Zephyrian, maybe 5.5 feet. Her blue skin had a healthy glow that the others lacked. Silver lines ran from her temples down to her chin in complex patterns. But it was her eyes that caught Jake's attention. Purple eyes that still held fire. While the other prisoners looked defeated, this woman sat straight. She looked right back at Jake when their eyes met. No fear, no begging, just quiet anger. "She'll clean your quarters, cook your food, whatever you need," the officer continued. "Some of the guys have been using theirs for, well, you know. Up to you what you do with her." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "What if I don't want one?" The officer laughed. "Come on, Morrison. You earned this. Besides, orders are orders. Every captain gets a trophy. It's good for morale. Shows the men what winning looks like." Jake looked at Kira again. She was still watching him. He saw intelligence in those purple eyes. This had been a person with a life, a family, dreams. Now she was being given away like a prize at a fair. "I'll take her," Jake said quietly. The officer grinned. "Good choice. She's a pretty one. Here's her transfer papers." He handed Jake a tablet. "Just scan your thumb there to make it official." Jake pressed his thumb to the screen. Words appeared. "Property transfer complete. Zephyrian female designated Kira now belongs to Captain Jake Morrison, UES Liberty. Congratulations, Captain. She's all yours. The transport will take you both back to your ship in an hour." Jake nodded and walked over to Kira. She stood up as he approached. Even standing, she barely came up to his shoulder. "I am Jake Morrison," he said. "I know who you are," Kira replied. Her voice was soft but clear. "You destroyed my cousin's ship. He died in the explosion." Jake felt worse. "I'm sorry." Kira's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected an apology. Sorry does not bring back the dead. No, it doesn't. Jake looked around the room. Other soldiers were making their choices. Most grabbed their new slaves roughly, already talking about what they would make them do. "Come on, let's get out of here." They walked to the transport area in silence. Kira's metal bands made soft clicking sounds as she moved. Jake noticed she walked with her head up, not like a defeated prisoner. On the transport ship, they sat across from each other. Jake watched Kira look out the small window at the stars. Her face showed no emotion, but he could see her hands shake slightly. "Are you afraid?" Jake asked. Kira turned to look at him. "Should I be?" "No, you shouldn't be. Many humans would disagree with you." Jake leaned forward. "What do you know about humans?" "I know you take prisoners as slaves. I know you celebrate victory by breaking the spirits of your enemies. I know you think might makes right." Kira's voice stayed calm, but Jake heard the pain underneath. "Some humans think that way. Not all of us. You still took me." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Yes, I did." The transport docked with the UES Liberty. Jake's home for the past 3 years was a military cruiser with a crew of 800. As they walked through the corridors, other soldiers stared. Some called out congratulations. A few made rude comments about what Jake should do with his new pet. Jake's quarters were small but private. A bedroom, a sitting area, and a tiny kitchen. He had lived alone since his roommate died in battle 2 years ago. Kira stood in the middle of the room, looking around. "Where do you want me to sleep?" "There's a couch in the sitting room. You can use that." Kira looked surprised. "You are not going to chain me?" "No." "Lock me in?" "No." "Then what do you want from me?" Jake sat down heavily in his chair. He felt tired suddenly. "I don't want anything from you." "I do not understand." Jake looked at her. Really looked at her. "Not as a trophy or a slave, but as a person." "Neither do I." He stood up and walked to his desk. In the drawer was a small toolkit. Jake pulled out a magnetic key and walked back to Kira. "Hold out your hands." Kira stepped back. "What are you doing?" "Hold out your hands." Slowly, Kira raised her arms. Jake touched the key to the metal bands around her wrists. They clicked open and fell to the floor. Kira stared at her free hands like she had never seen them before. She looked up at Jake with confusion and something that might have been hope. "You're free to go," Jake said. "Go where?" "Anywhere you want. The next transport leaves tomorrow morning. I'll make sure you get on it." Kira's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the couch, still staring at her hands. "I don't understand. You just bought me. Why would you let me go?" Jake sat down across from her. "Because nobody should own another person, human or Zephyrian." For the first time since he had met her, Kira's calm mask broke. Tears ran down her blue cheeks. "My world is occupied. My family is dead. If I go back, they will kill me as a traitor for surviving. If I stay here, other humans will capture me again." Jake felt his heart break a little. "Then stay here. As your slave?" "As my guest." Kira looked at him for a long time. Outside the small window, stars moved slowly past as the Liberty traveled through space. Finally, she spoke. "Why? Why are you different?" Jake thought about all the death he had seen, all the friends he had lost, all the Zephyrian ships he had destroyed, knowing there were people inside them. People with families and dreams. "Because this war has taken enough from both of us. Maybe it's time to try something different." Kira wiped her tears away. "What do you want me to call you?" "Jake, just Jake." "Thank you, Jake." Outside, the war was over. But for Jake and Kira, something new was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Jake freed Kira from her chains. She had not left his quarters, not because she was forced to stay, but because she had nowhere else to go. Every morning, Jake expected to find her gone. Every morning, she was still there, reading books from his small library or looking out the window at the stars. They barely spoke at first. Jake went to work each day while Kira stayed in the room. She cleaned sometimes, but Jake told her she didn't have to. She cooked dinner a few times, making strange but tasty food from the basic supplies in his kitchen. Other soldiers on the ship talked about their trophies. Captain Ryan Cole bragged about making his Zephyrian prisoner work in the engine rooms for 18 hours a day. Lieutenant Pete Davis laughed about how his slave flinched whenever he walked into the room. Jake said nothing during these conversations. He just felt sick. On the 3rd week, Jake came back to find Kira reading one of his history books. She looked up when he entered. "This book says humans fought a war against slavery on your home world 200 years ago, she said. Jake sat down across from her. "Yes, it was called the Civil War. Many people died to end slavery in America. But now you have slaves again." Jake had no good answer for that. "Some humans learn from history. Others repeat it." Kira closed the book. "My people had slavery once too. 1,000 years ago. We learned it was wrong. What changed your minds?" "A plague hit our world. It killed rich and poor alike, noble and slave. We learned that all life has value when we almost lost everything." Kira looked sad. "I thought we remembered that lesson. But then the dying started." "The dying?" Kira was quiet for a moment. "Our sun is growing old, getting hotter. Our worlds are becoming too hot to live on. The scientists said we had maybe 50 years before our people would all be dead." Jake leaned forward. "Is that why you attacked us?" "The Council of Houses voted to find new worlds. Your space had planets that could support our people. At first, they wanted to ask for help. To share the worlds." Kira's voice became bitter. "But the military said humans would never agree. They said the only way was to take what we needed. Were they right?" Kira looked at him. What do you think? Would humans have shared their worlds with dying aliens? Jake thought about it honestly. Some would have, others. He shook his head. Probably not. So the war began. And now my people are slaves instead of settlers. And in 40 years we will all be dead anyway. They sat in silence for a while. Jake thought about all the Zephyrian fighters he had shot down. All those pilots had been fighting for their species' survival, not conquest. They had been desperate people doing desperate things. I never knew, Jake said finally. Your leaders did not tell your soldiers the truth? They said you wanted to conquer Earth, to make humans slaves. Kira laughed, but there was no joy in it. We just wanted to live. But I suppose conquerors always say their victims deserved it. The next day, Jake brought Kira to the ship's library. It was bigger than his personal collection, and had computer access to military databases. Kira spent hours reading about human history, science, and culture. Jake watched her learn, seeing the sharp mind that had made her a diplomat. Your people are very young, Kira said one evening as they ate dinner together. Only 10,000 years of recorded history. My people have 20,000. Does that make us primitive? No, just different. Young species often have more energy, more willingness to take risks. It is why you spread to so many worlds so quickly. Kira paused. It is also why you fight so much. Jake had started looking forward to these conversations. Kira was smart and funny when she relaxed. She told him stories about Zephyrian art and music. She explained their philosophy and religion. In return, Jake shared human culture with her. They watched movies together and listened to music. One night, Jake found Kira crying over a book about Earth's oceans. What's wrong? He asked. My homeworld has no oceans anymore. They boiled away 50 years ago. I had forgotten what they looked like. She wiped her eyes. I used to swim in the small lakes when I was young. The water was so blue and cool. Jake felt a strange urge to comfort her. Maybe someday you'll see Earth's oceans. Impossible. Zephyrians are not allowed on Earth. Laws can change. Kira looked at him strangely. You really believe that? I have to. Their friendship grew stronger each day. Jake learned that Kira had been studying human languages and culture for years before the war. She had hoped to be part of the diplomatic mission that would ask for help. Instead, she had watched her world choose violence over conversation. I tried to stop the war, she told him one night. I spoke to the council many times. I told them humans might help if we explained our situation. But too many houses wanted to take what they needed by force. What happened to you? I was declared a traitor for opposing the war. They sent me to a prison camp. When your forces captured the camp, I became a prisoner of war instead of a prisoner of my own people. Kira smiled sadly. Strange how life works. Jake began to understand why Kira's eyes still held fire. She had been fighting for peace even when her own people called her a traitor. She had more courage than most soldiers he knew. Meanwhile, Jake started hearing disturbing rumors on the ship. Other soldiers talked about trading their trophies to friends. Some mentioned selling them to mining companies that needed workers. A few joked about breeding programs to create more slaves. When Jake asked his commanding officer about these rumors, Colonel Dan Rogers just shrugged. Their property now, Morrison. The owners can do what they want with them. It's not our problem anymore. But they're people, intelligent beings with rights, Rogers laughed. They're defeated enemies. They gave up their rights when they attacked us. Don't go soft now, Captain. Enjoy your trophy like everyone else. That night, Jake told Kira what he had heard. Her face went pale. So it begins, she said quietly. What begins? The systematic destruction of my people. First slavery, then breeding, then we become just another resource to be used up. Kira looked at Jake. How long do you think before there are no more free Zephyrians anywhere? Jake didn't have an answer, but he knew she was right. What he had seen as random cruelty was actually planned elimination. The human leadership wanted to make sure the Zephyrians could never threaten them again. There has to be something we can do, Jake said. We? Yes, we. I won't sit back and watch this happen. Kira stared at him. You would risk your career, your life, for aliens who were your enemies? Jake thought about his friends who had died in the war. Good people who had fought for what they thought was right. They didn't die so we could become the thing we were fighting against. And what were you fighting against? An empire that conquered weaker peoples and made them slaves. Jake realized how that sounded. Just like we're doing now. Kira reached across the table and touched his hand. Her skin was warm and soft. "You're a strange human, Jake Morrison. Good strange or bad strange? Dangerous strange, the kind that changes things." Late that night, Jake lay in his bed thinking about everything Kira had told him, about the dying worlds and the desperate people, about the choice between asking for help or taking what they needed, about how easy it was to become the evil you were fighting against. In the next room, he could hear Kira moving around. She had nightmares sometimes. She would call out names in her own language. Her family, Jake guessed. People who were dead now because of the war. He got up and knocked softly on her door. "Come in," Kira said. She was sitting by the window in her nightclothes, looking out at the stars. Her silver markings seemed to glow in the dim light. "Couldn't sleep either?" Jake asked. "I keep thinking about your question. What we could do." Kira turned to face him. "There might be a way, but it would be very dangerous for both of us." "What kind of way?" "Some humans are not happy with what their government is doing. I have heard rumors of protests on Earth. Scientists and teachers who say the slavery is wrong." Kira's eyes brightened. "If we could get proof of what is really happening to my people, maybe we could show it to these humans." Jake sat down next to her. "What kind of proof?" "Records, documents, video of the camps where they are keeping prisoners. Evidence that this is planned genocide, not just the spoils of war." "That would be treason." "Yes." "We could be executed." "Yes." Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, thousands of Zephyrians were living in chains. Somewhere else, human leaders were planning the complete destruction of an alien species. And here, in this small room, a human soldier and a former enemy were planning to stop it. "When do we start?" Jake asked. Kira smiled for the first time since he had known her. "Tomorrow." Outside the window, the stars looked different somehow, like they were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake started his investigation the next morning. As a captain, he had access to many military databases. He told Kira to stay in his quarters while he worked. If anyone saw them together too much, people might ask questions. The first thing Jake looked for was prisoner transfer records. What he found made him sick. In the past month, over 3,000 Zephyrian prisoners had been moved from military camps to civilian work programs. The records didn't say what kind of work. Jake dug deeper. He found shipping manifests for cargo ships heading to mining worlds. Mixed in with equipment and supplies were entries for biological assets and organic work units. The numbers matched the missing prisoners. "They're not even calling them people anymore," Jake told Kira that night. Kira read through the files Jake had copied. Her hands shook as she saw the numbers. 3,000. Just this month, and it's getting worse. Next month, they're planning to transfer 5,000 more. Kira was quiet for a long time. These mining worlds. What are they like? Jake pulled up information about Kepler 438b, one of the destinations. High radiation, toxic atmosphere. Humans need protective suits to work there for more than a few hours. And Zephyrians? Our skin can handle more radiation, but not that much. Without protection, we would die in days. Kira's voice was flat. They are not planning to keep us alive very long. Jake felt anger building in his chest. This is murder. Slow murder, but still murder. Murder is when you kill people. This is something worse. This is turning people into things and then using them up. The next day, Jake used his security clearance to access more files. He found contracts between the military and private companies. Mining corporations were paying billions of credits for Zephyrian workers. The contracts called them expendable labor units with expected operational lifespans of 6 to 8 months. Jake also found something else. Orders from the very top of the military command. General Carl Brennan, the hero of the Battle of Titan, had signed off on the entire program. The same man who had pinned medals on Jake's chest was treating intelligent beings like disposable tools. I need to get evidence from one of these mining worlds, Jake told Kira. Documents aren't enough. People need to see what's actually happening. How? You cannot just fly to a mining world and take pictures. Jake thought about it. Supply runs. Ships bring food and equipment to the mining stations every 2 weeks. If I volunteered for one of those missions, too dangerous. If they catch you recording, they will know someone is investigating. But Jake had an idea. What if they didn't catch me? What if I went as part of my normal duties? Jake talked to Colonel Rogers the next day. He said he was bored with routine patrol missions and wanted to see some real action. Rogers laughed and said the mining worlds were hardly action, but he could arrange a supply run to Kepler 438b. Just don't expect excitement, Morrison. You'll drop off supplies, maybe check the equipment, and fly home. Boring as hell. Jake left 3 days later on a cargo ship called the Mercy. The trip to Kepler 438b took 18 hours. Jake spent the time hiding tiny cameras in his uniform and practicing with a new recording device Kira had helped him build from spare parts. Kepler 438b looked like hell from space. Red and brown with swirling toxic storms. The mining station was built into the side of a mountain, protected by an energy shield. Jake's ship docked at the loading bay. Station Commander Roy Phillips met them at the airlock. He was a big man with scars on his face and mean eyes. "Welcome to Paradise Station, Captain. Hope you brought our beer. The workers have been complaining about the rations again." "Workers?" Phillips laughed. "The blueskins. Zephyrians. We've got about 200 of them digging rare metals out of the deep mines. They work harder when they're not happy with the food." Jake followed Phillips through the station. Through windows he could see Zephyrians in thin protective suits working in the mines below. Even with the suits, Jake could see their skin looked pale and sick. "How long do they usually last?" Jake asked, trying to sound casual. 6 months on average. Sometimes 8 if they're strong. The radiation gets them eventually, even with the suits. Phillips shrugged. "But hey, that's why we get new ones every month." Jake's hidden cameras recorded everything. The barracks where Zephyrians slept on metal shelves. The medical bay where sick workers were left to die. The punishment cells where troublemakers were locked up without food or water. The worst part was the workers themselves. Jake recognized the look in their eyes. The same empty stare he had seen in the distribution center. Hope beaten out of them day by day until only survival remained. One worker stumbled and fell while carrying heavy equipment. A human guard kicked him and shouted for him to get up. The Zephyrian struggled to his feet, blood running from his mouth. Jake wanted to help, but he forced himself to keep walking. If he showed sympathy for the prisoners, Phillips would know something was wrong. "We had some trouble last week," Phillips said as they toured the main mining level. Group of Blues tried to organize some kind of strike. Said the working conditions were too dangerous. "What did you do?" "Made an example of the ringleaders. Shot 3 of them in front of the others. No more trouble since then." Jake's hand moved toward his weapon before he stopped himself. Phillips was talking about murder like it was a minor problem with machinery. "Smart thinking," Jake managed to say. In the station's office, Jake saw the files he needed. Production reports, death tolls, requests for new workers. Phillips left him alone for a few minutes while he dealt with the mining emergency. Jake quickly copied everything onto his hidden data storage device. The numbers were horrifying. Paradise Station had received 800 Zephyrian workers in the past year. Only 37 were still alive. The rest had died from radiation, accidents, disease, or execution. And Paradise Station was just one of 47 mining operations using Zephyrian slaves. Jake did the math in his head. If every station had similar death rates, over 30,000 Zephyrians had died in the mines in just 1 year. At this rate, the entire prisoner population would be dead within 3 years. On the flight back to the Liberty, Jake felt numb. He had seen wars before. He had watched friends die in battle. But this was different. This was not war. This was systematic destruction of an entire people, done slowly and quietly where no one would see. When he got back to his quarters, Kira was waiting for him. She took one look at his face and knew. "How bad?" she asked. Jake showed her the recordings and files. Kira watched in silence as the evidence of her people's suffering played on his computer screen. When it was over, she sat very still for a long time. "How many?" she finally asked. 30,000 dead so far, maybe more." Kira closed her eyes. "I knew some of those people." In the medical bay recording, the woman with the broken arm was Dr. Zara Velnith. She taught at our university. She used to help sick children for free. "I'm sorry. The man they shot in the footage from last week, that was Commander Hex Valthon. He was my friend's husband. She is probably dead too, and she will never know what happened to him." Jake reached out to touch Kira's shoulder, but she pulled away. "Do not comfort me yet. First, tell me you have a plan to stop this. I have all the evidence we need. Video, documents, death records. If we can get this to the right people on Earth." "What people?" "Your military leaders already know. They signed the orders." Jake had been thinking about this during the flight home. Reporters, scientists, teachers, religious leaders. The kind of people who led the protests against slavery in America 200 years ago. And how do we get this information to Earth? You cannot just send it through military communication systems. Jake smiled grimly. No, but there are other ways. Smugglers, black market traders. People who move cargo between systems without asking too many questions. That is very dangerous. Everything we're doing is dangerous. Kira looked at the recordings again. There is something else. Someone you need to know about. Who?
General Brennan.
I met him during the war. He was the one who ordered the bombing of our civilian cities. Even when we tried to surrender, he kept attacking. Kira's eyes burned with anger. He told our negotiators that the only good Zephyrian was a dead Zephyrian. Jake felt cold. He's the one who signed the mining contracts. Then he is the one we need to stop. That night, Jake lay awake thinking about everything he had seen. Paradise Station was just the beginning. Brennan and his people had turned genocide into a business. They were making money while destroying an entire species. But they had made one mistake. They had given Jake a Zephyrian slave instead of killing her. And that slave had become his partner in the most important mission of his life. Jake got up and found Kira standing by the window again. She did this every night now, looking out at the stars like she was searching for something. What are you thinking about? He asked. My sister. She was captured in the last battle of the war. I do not know if she is in a camp or a mine or already dead. Kira's voice was soft. I think about all the people we cannot save. All the ones who will die while we try to get help. Jake stood beside her. We'll save as many as we can. Promise me something. What? If we fail, if they catch us before we can expose the truth, promise me you will find another way. Promise me you will not give up. Jake looked at her reflection in the window. In the glass, her. Jake's chance came 2 weeks later. The Liberty docked at Ceres Station for supplies and repairs. The huge space station was a trading hub where merchants, smugglers, and travelers from across the galaxy came to do business. Jake told Colonel Rogers he wanted to visit the entertainment district. Rogers laughed and told him to have fun. Jake and Kira walked through the crowded markets and bars of Ceres Station. Kira wore a hood to hide her silver markings, but even covered up, she attracted stares. Not many aliens traveled freely in human space anymore. They found the person they were looking for in a dark bar, called the Black Hole. Tony Ricci was a cargo pilot who smuggled everything from weapons to medicine across the galaxy. He was also one of the few humans willing to help Zephyrian refugees escape to neutral space. You're either very brave or very stupid, Tony said after Jake explained what they wanted. Sending anti-government propaganda to Earth is treason. They'll execute you both if they catch you. People need to know the truth, Jake said. Tony looked at Kira. And you trust him, a human soldier who fought against your people? He freed me when he could have kept me as a slave. He is risking his life to save my people. Yes, I trust him. Tony drank his beer and thought about it. I know some people on Earth. Reporters who are already asking questions about the prison camps. Scientists who think the war crimes trials were a joke. They might be interested in your evidence. How much? Jake asked. For getting data to Earth. 50,000 credits, Jake winced. That was more money than he made in 2 years. I don't have that much. Then find someone who does. They left the bar feeling defeated. Jake had some savings, but nowhere near enough, and they couldn't ask for help without revealing what they were doing. Then Kira had an idea. What about other soldiers? Other humans who think this is wrong? What do you mean? You cannot be the only human with a conscience. There must be others who are sick of what their leaders are doing. Jake thought about it. There were rumors of soldiers asking for transfers rather than guard prison camps. Some had even requested early discharge from the military. Maybe Kira was right. Jake started carefully talking to other soldiers on the Liberty. He didn't mention his investigation, just asked what they thought about the treatment of prisoners. Most supported the official policy, but a few seemed uncomfortable. Lieutenant Amy Walsh was one of them. She had been a military lawyer before the war and still believed in following the rules. When Jake mentioned the Geneva Conventions, she got angry. Those treaties are supposed to protect prisoners of war, but somehow alien prisoners don't count as people anymore. Amy looked around to make sure no one was listening. I've seen the contracts for the mining companies. What we're doing is slavery, plain and simple. Jake decided to trust her. What if there was a way to expose it? To show the galaxy what's really happening? Amy stared at him. That would be career suicide. Maybe actual suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it would save thousands of lives. After a long pause, Amy nodded. What do you need? Amy introduced Jake to Dr. Ben Parker, a military doctor who had been treating Zephyrian prisoners. Ben was horrified by what he saw in the medical reports. The radiation exposure alone should have been enough to stop the mining program. These people are dying of cancers that would take humans years to develop. But the military doctors are calling it natural mortality and ordering more workers. Ben knew 2 other doctors who felt the same way. They had been trying to improve medical care for prisoners, but their requests were always denied. Soon Jake had a small group of people willing to help. Amy the lawyer, Ben and his doctor friends, 3 junior officers who had refused transfers to guard duty, and even 1 reporter who worked for the military newspaper. They met secretly in Amy's quarters. Jake showed them the evidence from Paradise Station. The recordings of dying workers and casual brutality, the documents proving it was all planned from the top. This is worse than I thought, Amy said after watching the footage. This isn't just abuse. It's systematic extermination. Genocide, added Dr. Sarah Kim, one of Ben's friends. And it's happening right now while we sit here talking. Kira spoke up. My people are dying while waiting for rescue that may never come. Every day we delay, more families are destroyed. The reporter, Chris Miller, studied the documents. This evidence is solid, but getting it to Earth won't be enough. We need to time the release perfectly. What do you mean? Jake asked. Victory Day is in 6 weeks. The biggest celebration in human space. Parades, speeches, military demonstrations. Every news network in the galaxy will be covering it. Chris smiled grimly. What if they had to cover something else instead? Amy leaned forward. A public revelation during the biggest pro-war celebration of the year. It would be impossible to cover up or ignore. But how do we get the evidence to Earth reporters during Victory Day? Jake asked. We don't send it to Earth, Chris said. We take it there ourselves. The plan was dangerous but simple. Chris had contacts at several major news networks. If they could get the evidence to Earth and coordinate the release during Victory Day, it would have maximum impact. The problem was getting there. Military personnel couldn't just take leave to visit Earth during the biggest military celebration of the year. They would need a good reason to be there. Amy found the solution. Military Honor Guard. They need officers to participate in the Victory Day parade. I can get us assigned. All of us? Jake asked. A few of us. Enough to get the job done. While Amy worked on their travel arrangements, the others gathered more evidence. Dr. Ben and his team documented medical abuse at prison camps across 3 star systems. The junior officers used their access to compile lists of missing prisoners and suspicious transfer orders. Kira helped by translating Zephyrian documents they found in the files. Many were personal letters from prisoners to their families, begging for help that would never come. Others were reports from Zephyrian doctors describing the terrible conditions in the camps. This letter is from a mother to her daughter, Kira said, translating one document. She says the guards have taken away their children and put them in separate camps. She doesn't know if her son is still alive. Jake felt sick reading the translations. They're separating families? Children are easier to control when they are alone, and they eat less food. Kira's voice was flat, but Jake could see the pain in her eyes. As they worked, Jake noticed something changing in the group. At first, the humans had been uncomfortable around Kira. Some had never talked to a Zephyrian before except to give orders or take surrenders. But as they spent time together, those barriers started breaking down. Dr. Sarah Kim asked Kira about Zephyrian medicine and was amazed by their advanced understanding of genetics. Amy learned about Zephyrian law and found it was often more fair than human legal systems. Chris discovered that Zephyrian art and music were beautiful and complex. I never realized how much we lost when we chose war over peace, Amy said one night. We could have learned so much from each other. Kira smiled sadly. Perhaps we still can, if any of my people survive long enough. 3 weeks before Victory Day, they got bad news. Tony Ricci was arrested by military police on charges of smuggling Zephyrian refugees. His ship was searched and all his files were confiscated. If they find evidence of our meetings, we're all dead, Amy said. Jake made a decision. We go to Earth anyway. With or without Tony's help. How? We don't have contacts at the news networks. We make our own contacts. Chris, you worked for the military news service. You must know some civilian reporters. Chris nodded slowly. A few. but approaching them with stolen military documents is still treason. Everything we're doing is treason, Jake said. The question is whether we're traitors to our government or traitors to our conscience. 2 weeks later, Jake, Amy, Chris, and Kira boarded a transport ship bound for Earth. Amy had managed to get herself and Chris assigned to honor guard duty. Jake was officially escorting a prisoner for a war crimes hearing. The prisoner was Kira, who was playing the role of a captured Zephyrian officer. During the 3-day journey to Earth, they finalized their plan. Chris would contact his reporter friends and arrange meetings. Amy would provide legal backing for their evidence. Jake would handle security and make sure they stayed safe. Kira's job was the most dangerous. She would appear on camera with the human reporters, giving the story a face and voice that people couldn't ignore. But if she was recognized as a supposed prisoner, their cover would be blown. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked her the night before they reached Earth. "Once you appear on the broadcasts, there's no going back. They'll hunt you for the rest of your life." Kira looked out the ship's window at the blue and white planet growing larger in the distance. "My people are dying in silence. Someone needs to speak for them. If it cost me my life, so be it." Jake took her hand. Somewhere during their months together, friendship had become something deeper. He cared about this alien woman more than he had ever cared about anyone. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised. "You cannot promise that, but you can promise to finish what we started, even if I am not there to see it." "I promise." As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Jake looked down at the world he had been born on. From space, it looked peaceful and beautiful. But he knew that in just 3 days, Victory Day morning in Geneva was bright and clear. Military parades marched through the streets while crowds cheered. Giant screens showed highlights from the war against the Zephyrians. Politicians gave speeches about human strength and the bright future ahead. Jake stood in his dress uniform with the other honor guard officers, watching General Brennan practice his speech. The man who had ordered the genocide of an entire species smiled and waved at the cameras like a movie star. "Today we celebrate not just our victory over the alien threat, but our bright future as the dominant species in this galaxy," Brennan said during rehearsal. "We have shown that humanity will never bow to foreign powers. We take what we need and keep what we earn." The audience of military officers applauded. Jake felt sick but forced himself to clap along. In a few hours, if everything went according to plan, General Brennan would be finished forever. Chris Miller had spent the past 2 days meeting with reporters from 3 major news networks. At first, they had been suspicious. Military personnel offering classified information usually meant a trap. But when Chris showed them Jake's recordings from Paradise Station, everything changed. "This is the biggest story since the war ended," said Janet Ross from Global News Network. "But we need more than just videos. We need someone willing to go on camera and tell the story." That someone was Kira. She had spent the morning in a safe house outside Geneva, preparing for what might be the last interview of her life. Amy had helped her practice answering questions while Jake checked their security arrangements. "Remember, once you start talking, there's no going back," Amy warned. "Every government agent in the solar system will be looking for you." Kira nodded calmly. "My people have been dying in silence for too long. It is time for the galaxy to hear their voices." The plan was simple but risky. At exactly 2 o'clock, during the middle of General Brennan's Victory Day speech, the 3 news networks would simultaneously broadcast Kira's interview and Jake's evidence. The timing was critical. If they went too early, the government could cut the broadcasts. Too late, and fewer people would be watching. Jake's job was to create a distraction during Brennan's speech. Something big enough to keep the general and his security team busy while the broadcasts went live. At 1:30, Jake took his position near the main stage. Around him, thousands of people filled the plaza, watching the celebration on giant screens. Military bands played victory songs while jets flew overhead in formation. At 1:45, Kira walked into the news studio across the city. Janet Ross greeted her nervously. "Are you ready for this? Once we go live, there's no stopping what happens next." "I have been ready my whole life," Kira replied. At 1:50, General Brennan stepped up to the podium. The crowd cheered as cameras focused on him. All across human space, billions of people were watching. "My fellow humans," Brennan began, "today marks 1 year since our great victory over the Zephyrian Empire. We have proven that humanity will not be conquered, will not be enslaved, will not bow to any alien power. The crowd roared approval. Jake checked his watch. 2 minutes to go. At the news studio, Janet Ross counted down. Live in 30 seconds. Remember, once we start, we can't stop for any reason. Kira sat calmly in the interview chair. She had removed her hood, letting her silver markings shine under the studio lights. For the first time in months, she looked like the diplomat she had once been. I understand, Kira said. Let us begin. At exactly 2 o'clock, Jake made his move. He stepped forward from the honor guard formation and shouted at the top of his voice. General Brennan is a war criminal. The crowd went silent. Security guards immediately moved toward Jake, but he kept shouting. The man you're cheering is committing genocide. He's murdering innocent civilians for profit. General Brennan's face turned red with anger. Arrest that man. But Jake wasn't finished. The mining camps, the slave labor, the systematic murder of prisoners. Ask him about Paradise Station. Security guards tackled Jake, but the damage was done. The crowd was confused and angry. Some people were shouting questions, others demanding answers. The perfect Victory Day celebration had become chaos. At that exact moment, across the city and across the galaxy, 3 news networks interrupted their Victory Day coverage with breaking news. We interrupt this program with urgent breaking news, Janet Ross announced. We have obtained evidence of massive war crimes being committed by Earth military forces against Zephyrian prisoners of war. On screens across human space, Kira's face appeared. Many humans had never seen a living Zephyrian up close. Her alien features and silver markings made it clear this was no human actor or propaganda trick. My name is Kira of House Veltar, she said in perfect English. I am a survivor of what your leaders call victory. I am here to tell you what your government is doing in your name. For the next 10 minutes, while Jake was dragged away in handcuffs and General Brennan tried to regain control of his speech, Kira told the galaxy the truth. She spoke about the dying worlds that had driven her people to war, about the failed attempts at peaceful negotiation, about the prison camps and mining stations where thousands of Zephyrians were dying every month. We did not want this war, Kira said, looking directly into the camera. We wanted to live. We asked for help. We offered to share our knowledge and culture in exchange for new homes. Your leaders chose violence instead of conversation, and now they are choosing genocide instead of peace. The news networks played Jake's recordings from Paradise Station. Viewers saw Zephyrian workers dying from radiation poisoning. They heard human guards talking about murder like it was routine maintenance. They saw documents proving the entire program was planned and approved at the highest levels, but the most powerful moment came when Kira showed photos of her family. This is my sister Zara. She was captured in the final battle of the war. I do not know if she is in a prison camp or a mining station or already dead. This is my nephew Kyle. He was 12 years old when the war ended. He should be learning about art and music and the beauty of the universe. Instead, he is probably digging in radioactive mines until his small body gives out. Tears ran down Kira's face as she spoke, but her voice stayed strong. I am not asking for revenge. I am not asking you to feel guilty for winning a war. I am asking you to remember what it means to be human. I'm asking you to choose compassion over cruelty. I am asking you to stop this genocide before it is too late to save what is left of my people. The interviews ended with a simple message scrolling across the screen. Verified footage and documents available at truthaboutthevictory.net. Decide for yourself. Within minutes, the website was flooded with millions of viewers downloading the evidence. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people defended the government, but many more were horrified by what they saw. On Earth, General Brennan tried to finish his speech, but the crowd was no longer listening. People were checking their phones and tablets, watching Kira's interview and Jake's footage. Some started leaving the plaza. Others began arguing with each other. The footage is fake, Brennan shouted into his microphone. Alien propaganda designed to weaken humanity's resolve. But his words fell on deaf ears. Too many people had seen too much evidence. The careful lie that the government had built around the prisoner program was crumbling in real time. Jake was taken to a military detention facility, but he could hear the chaos outside his cell. Guards were arguing about what they had seen on the news. Some defended their orders, but others were asking uncomfortable questions. Amy and Chris were arrested an hour later, but by then it was too late to stop what they had started. The story was everywhere. News networks across the galaxy were picking up the broadcast. Even some alien species that had stayed neutral during the war were expressing outrage at humanity's treatment of prisoners. Most importantly, human civilians were reacting exactly as Jake had hoped. Protests erupted in major cities across Earth and the colonies. Religious leaders called for an end to the slave labor. Scientists and doctors condemned the medical experiments on prisoners. Even some military officers spoke out against their own government. Within 24 hours, over 1 billion people had viewed Kira's interview. Millions more had downloaded the evidence files. The pressure on the government became impossible to ignore. 3 days after Victory Day, President Helen Carter announced a full investigation into the treatment of Zephyrian prisoners. General Brennan was suspended pending criminal charges. The mining program was immediately shut down. But the real victory came 2 weeks later. Jake, Amy, and Chris were released from prison after massive protests demanded their freedom. They were heroes to millions of people who saw them as the conscience of humanity. Jake's first stop after his release was the safe house where Kira was hiding. When he walked in, she ran to him and they held each other like they would never let go. "We did it," Jake whispered. "We actually did it." "No," Kira said, smiling through her tears. "We started it. The real work begins now." She was right. Over the following months, Jake and Kira worked with the new government to establish refugee programs for surviving Zephyrians. They helped create medical treatment centers for workers damaged by radiation. They testified at war crimes trials that sent dozens of military leaders to prison. Most importantly,